Hello and welcome to the quarterfinals of GP Sydney. On the left of our screen, that is our number one ranked player in the world. That is our world champion, Seth Manfield. He snuck into this top 8 in 7th place and is up against Zen Takahashi of New Zealand, who in 2nd place is playing the colour combination that Seth Manfield has been playing throughout this tournament until the top 8. He's on red-black, starting with an Ember Eye Wolf. Seth Manfield, we've just seen his draft. He is on blue-white tempo and is going to be looking to try and go to the air if he's going to win what is likely to be a relatively aggressive race.
Yes, indeed. I have Zen Takahashi's decklist in front of me, and it looks to be a fairly aggressive red-black deck, featuring, Graph Rats and Midnight Scavengers, so we may see some melt action going on. Other standouts in Zen's decklist are 2 copies of Smoldering Werewolf, the 4-drop that can ping down some of the opposing creatures when it comes down, and 1 Crypt Breaker, which, well, Zen certainly didn't have in his opening hand, otherwise he would have played it on turn 1. Best that Zen could muster early on is here, well, an Ember Eye Wolf and a Graph Rats. Nothing too impressive yet, not a great start for Zen Takahashi, who will represent his country at the World Magic Cup later in Rotterdam this year, and has been making quite a name for himself here at this Grand Prix.
Yeah, Ingenious Scarb coming down for Seth Manfield, and that currently kind of ruling the roost in terms of creatures on the ground. But Zen Takahashi, I'm sure, will have something to say about that with his aggressive red-black deck. Zen, who, by making top 8 at this GP, has locked up silver, and he said that he's going to have to book a new flight to the Pro Tour because even though New Zealand, close to Australia, still kind of a 3-hour flight away, and he's going to have to adjust his travel plans a little because he's now qualified for the next 3 Pro Tours. Fantastic results for Takahashi, and I'm sure he's very pleased about that indeed as he plays a Wicker Witch here, having already taken down that Guardian of the Pilgrims with Galvanic Bombardment.
Yeah, if Zen manages to find a mountain on the next turn, then he has access to Smoldering Werewolf. But so far, Zen appears to be constrained on mana just a little bit. At least that Wicker Witch and potentially the Ember Eye Wolf could attack into the tree, Toughness, Ingenious Scarb. So far, Zen is slightly ahead on the battlefield, but not by much. This is shaping up to be a fairly close game, assuming that Seth has at least some action in hand. Now Seth always he plays with his cards close to his chest, so it's hard to get a peek at what's in his hand. Looks like there is a 2/2 flyer coming down.
Yeah, Spectral Shepherd, able to bounce any spirits at the cost of 3 mana, including the 1 blue in there. And I think that one thing that this match may come down to is who draws the better spells. Both of these decks have relatively sort of low to the ground aggressive creatures, albeit some of them flying on Seth Manfield's side of things. But where things get interesting is the spells. For the blue-white deck, we know that there's a whole bunch of combat tricks. For red-black, well, there could certainly be plenty of combat tricks, but additionally more traditional actual removal spells. It'll be interesting to see how they get deployed over the next few turns.
Well, this could be huge if Zen pumps the Ember Eye Wolf and Seth Manfield has the combat trick that he has 2 copies of, Strength of Arms. Yep, that's a blowout. Ingenious Scarb turns into a 3/4, takes down the boosted Ember Eye Wolf. Wicker Witch, well, it fell to a boosted 4/4 Spectral Shepherd. That is a wonderful play for Seth Manfield. With just 1 mana and 1 card, he was able to take out 2 cards on Zen Takahashi's side of the board, so that's a 2-for-1 trade in terms of card economy. And on top of that, he was also able to trade that 1 mana for an investment of a total of 8 mana on Takahashi's side. That is an incredible swing.
Yeah, Takahashi a little bit light on mana anyway, so having to have wasted that much is really going to sting. Meanwhile, Apothecary Geist coming down for Seth Manfield, getting him a couple of life as he has another spirit in play. And Takahashi staring at a Spreading Flames in his hand that is looking very far away from being able to be cast here. Just 3 mana available and 7 required. But if you're looking for a creature that can turn things around, Crypt Breaker might be it. Just the 1 mana to cast, you can pay 1 and a black, tap and discard a card to put a 2/2 zombie into play, and then if you happen to have 3 zombies, you can tap them at any moment to lose a life and draw a card. Seth Manfield says, I do not want to give you the time to be able to leverage that one. Swings in with all of his creatures. Only one of them is going to be blockable by Zen Takahashi, that being Ingenious Scarb, and with 5 mana available, any number of different things that a Seth Manfield can do, from pumping that Ingenious Scarb to using spells to trigger prowess to make it bigger. One way or another, Zen Takahashi here, kind of on the wrong side of things.
Absolutely. He can either double block the Scarp and then lose again 2 creatures in the process, or as he chose to not block at all, but then he takes 8 damage in the process, falling down to 8 life, in danger of dying in 2 attack steps to the 2 flyers from Seth Manfield. Seth also has the mana up to potentially bounce a spirit in case of some kind of removal spell, so Zen super far behind here. That Crit Breaker, hey, it is a very powerful card, but one thing it cannot do is dealing with flyers, and Zen appears to be very much constrained on mana and on the right tools to deal with Seth Manfield's attack. Yeah, that Strength of Arms was such a blowout this game. Just the perfect card for the situation for Seth Manfield over there.
Takahashi just considering his options here, just looking on as Seth Manfield swings all in once again. This time there will have to be some blocks.
Yeah, that Ingenious Scarp has to be blocked for sure, otherwise it presents 8 points of damage. Now Zen can produce a zombie and then, say, double block the Ingenious Scarp. He would lose his Graph Rats and the zombie token in the process if he goes for that play, but it's not like Zen has many options here. And even then, he will have to find some answers to these flyers on the next turn already. So Seth Manfield, even if he has all lands in hand, he can just boost his Ingenious Scarp, turning it into 3 power to be able to trade for the 2 creatures on Takahashi's side.
Yeah, and when that's your worst case scenario, sorry, your worst case scenario for Seth,
Oh yes.
then yeah, that's a terrible case for Zen Takahashi, because there could be something more coming from Seth Manfield here. We know that he has a couple of copies of Borrowed Grace in his deck, and they would be enough to just end the game right here.
Well, looks like there's another Strength of Arms coming down, given that he is stepping 1 white mana. And he chooses to save his Ingenious Scarp. Seth also had the option of, say, pumping one of his flyers to put Zen Takahashi down to an even lower life total, but just goes for the safe route of making sure that he has a good board in case Zen cobbles together something insane like 2 removal spells over the course of the next turn. Now Zen has to contend with, well, 6 power in the air, still an Ingenious Scarp that he has no good blocker for, and with only 3 lands on the battlefield, that'll do it.
Yeah, so a powerful start for Seth Manfield there. One has to say that Zen Takahashi, hampered on mana, we didn't see his best game there, and he was always going to struggle. But, I mean, basically, if there was one pivotal play for that game, it was that first Strength of Arms. Being able to use the Prowess trigger to keep his Enlightened Scarab around, and then also pump one of his other creatures to get 2 different creatures killed off with just the one trick. Absolutely colossal. We're going to get a chance to look in on one of our other games in our quarterfinals, though. Scott Lipp, he was the first place finisher up against Thierry Ramboa of France. And here, another red-black deck in our top 8. Voldaren Duelist, and there an Indulgent Vampire with some equipment.
It's Stitcher's Graph that gives it +3/+3, so that's currently a 4/4. Not quite big enough to take down the Intrepid Provisioner yet, except when it gets an additional counter by eating another friend. It's lovely to see the Lupine Prototype attacking. This is a card that I, well, was thinking about for Modern Affinity, but it's also beautiful to see that it can do some work in Limited. It's a 5/5, and one of the 2 players has to be hellbent, that is no cards in hand for it to be able to attack or block, so definitely a bit of a risk. But it appears like many of the players in the top 8 are focusing on these low curve decks with plenty of cheap cards that allow them to put all of their cards on the battlefield and from their hand quickly and early, thereby allowing this Lupine Prototype to become quite a fearsome attacker. And only, hey, if this would have no ability, a 5/5 for 2 mana, there are few creatures in the history of the game that are that big.
Well, it looks like Ben Stark did go for the red-white build. We can already see a Dawn Griffin play for him alongside a Voldaren Duelist. He's already a game up with his aggressive build, and in spite of all of those green-white creatures for Santiago de Pauli, he's got Talia in play, he's got Lamholt Pacifist in play. He is Still facing down attacks here, but a bold attack from Ben Stark on just 5 life. I presume that there must be some nice follow-up here for him.
No, just a tapped creature. Well, how can Ben survive here? Well, there's Repel the Abominable in the format, but that prevents damage only from non-human sources, and Santiago has plenty of humans. I don't think there are many cards in the format that would allow Ben Stark to survive here. Press for answers. Well, that will buy him a turn. Not bad. So we may have somewhat of a damage race after all.
Yeah, Stark down to a low life total here, but at least he's in with a chance. He's got a fair amount of attackers going on. It's really going to come down to if he's got a few tricks to be able to force through damage, because there will be some blockers for Santiago de Pauli. He's also got Sigardian Priest there to tap down one of Ben Stark's creatures, because Ben Stark, well, none of his creatures are humans, so they are all going to be problems there. But if you're looking for a big non-human that is going to be a really big problem for Ben Stark, it turns out Santiago de Pauli has the answer there too.
Yeah, this will be tough for Ben Stark. Any creatures that he would play will get tapped by Thalia on this turn. Santiago has plenty of power worth of attackers. Added of the Horde Swarm to the battlefield. This will also allow the Lamphold Pacifist to attack on the next turn, and Ben Stark has seen enough. Not able to defend against that.
Wow, these games are absolutely tumbling here. We've already seen Seth Manfield take his first game. We've seen Scott Lipp take his first game, and Ben Stark is already on to game 3 against Santiago de Pauli. So 3 out of 4 of our feature matches in the camera area. Unfortunately not able to catch Ben Sek on camera before we get back to our match with Zen Takahashi and Seth Manfield. And these players already drawing their opening hands as they go to their game 2.
So far, one thing is clear to me. This is not a format in which you want to be durdling around with not playing a creature on turn 2, skipping your 3-drop as well, maybe drawing some cards on turn 4, playing your first creature on turn 5. These games are fast. People are drafting, quick mana curves, lots of early drops, lots of combat tricks, and if you want to be competing in this format, you need to be having some early part of your curve as well.
Ember Eye Wolf there, getting stuck in for Zen Takahashi on turn 2. Meanwhile, Sigardian Priest coming down for Seth Manfield. So that will be able to tap down the Wolf. It will be able to tap down probably most of the creatures from this red-black deck. Not too many humans in red and black, apart from likes of Thermo Alchemist and so on.
Liliana's Elite, not the most impressive 3-drop. Just a 1-1. It will get +1/+1 for every creature in Zen Takahashi's graveyard, but currently no creatures there. This is just a 1/1 for 3. Not really the aggressive card that you need.
Looks like Seth Manfield just got a hit in there with his Priest. He knew he was going to be tapping his lands for mana, and as it turns out, Liliana's Elite not looking so elite right now, not able to deal with a lowly Priest. And Exultant Cultist coming along for Seth Manfield there. Currently the largest creature on the board.
Yeah, this is quite unusual. Liliana could really do better. I mean, if you look at her in Planeswalker form, her ultimate, so many zombies, this Elite is just embarrassing. A disgrace to the name of Liliana, I would say.
But gradually we're getting some larger creatures on the board there. 4 mana, the point where you start to throw out a few larger creatures. In this case, not with any madness, but a 3/3 is a 3/3, and currently ruling the roost on the board, albeit with Sigardian Priest now having a reasonable target to tap down. And you see there on the left of our screen, that's Seth Manfield, our world champion, figuring out exactly what he wants to do to navigate this board position. Already a game up and looking to secure a place in the semi-finals if he's able to win this one.
Yeah, if I look at the creature types on Zen's side of the board, none of them are humans. We have some zombies, we have some vampires, as well as, well, an Ember Eye Wolf, which is most clearly not a human. So Seth will be able to tap all of them down with that Sigardian Priest. So far, the board just is filling up slowly but steadily. All of the players hitting their curves so far, just setting up for, well, some of the bigger hitters perhaps in the mid game.
So Spectral Shepherd there, we saw it doing good work in game 1. Not really needing to use his ability, just simply, it's a 2/2 flyer, and when all of the other creatures are on the ground, that is good enough to represent a fair amount of damage. Zen Takahashi, though, this game hitting his land drops in a way that he simply didn't in game one. So we got a bit more of a game on our hands. The Vampire getting tapped down by Sigardian Priest, but here we have a big one in Gatstaff Shepherd. So that is a 5-4, potentially able to transform at some point.
Importantly, it is a human, so that one cannot be tapped down by Sigardian Priest.
Yeah, Gatstaff Arsonist, a human on this side, and even when it transforms, I think it does still have the human type, the werewolves.
No, if it transforms, it is just a werewolf.
No longer a human, so in some respects, that might be something that Seth Manfield wants to keep in mind.
Yeah, one of the unusual cases where the backside of the card is actually better for you as an opponent than the front side. Well, for that, Seth will have to pass the turn without playing any spells. It's also notable that Sigardian Priest that just taps down creatures may actually be better than hard removal spells due to that Liliana's Elite. If Seth would be spending cards to send creatures to the graveyard, well, that Liliana's Elite would be growing, but just tapping them down means that they are ineffectual and that Liliana's Elite will stay pretty small.
So just the one flyer getting stuck in here, dropping Takahashi's life total down a little bit further. And it looks like there are going to be some spells from Seth Manfield. And if you're going to start playing spells, then you might as well play some good ones, and he's got them. Ingenious Scab, obviously very powerful, but then we start looking at the Wharf Infiltrator, and that's where some real power lives.
Well, it's a powerful card, but that Ember Eye Wolf will happily block it. It's a 1/1 with Skulk, so any 1 power creatures on the Zen side of the battlefield will be able to block it, and Ember Eye Wolf a 1/2, just the perfect card against Wharf Infiltrator. Of course, Seth may be able to tap it down with his Sigardian Priest, but if he goes for that, then that Sigardian Priest is not tapping down another big creature, so that's still a fine position for Zen Takahashi.
Maybe he'll use a combat trick to pump his opponent's wolf so he can get stuck in. Sneaky plays from the world champion. It's possible. It doesn't seem very likely, but you know, these options are open.
Yep. So if you're Zen, well, you could start attacking with, say, the Gatstaff Arsonist and or the Weirded Vampire. Attacking with the Weirded Vampire will probably result in a double block by Exultant Cultist and Ingenious Scab. Not great, but just fine. Gatstaff Arsonist will potentially trade for both of those creatures if it is double blocked. The Ember Eye Wolf, hey, it would like to get in there, but Zen kind of needs it as a blocker for the Wharf Infiltrator. And Liliana's Elite will obviously stick back and watch eventually the graveyard fill up. So I like this attack from Zen. One card that Seth has to worry about is Borrowed Hostility, the Escalate combat trick from Eldritch Moon, giving first strike and or +3/+0 from with Escalate. I don't think Zen has any in his hand, but just one of the things that Seth Manfield has to worry about when deciding his blocks in the face of a lot of open mana here.
So yeah, Seth tapped out, not able to use the priest to tap something down. Instead, puts both that priest and his cultist in front of the 3/3 vampire. Loses his priest as a consequence. Wicker Witch coming down on Zen Takahashi's side of the board to make sure there's still at least one 3-power creature on his side of the board. And Liliana's Elite, now a 2/2.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that Seth chose to block with the Sigardian Priest rather than blocking with the Scab. That Sigardian Priest would be able to tap down a bunch of important creatures on Zen's side of the board. To me, what this might indicate is that Seth may feel like he's a bit bottlenecked on mana. As we already saw on this turn while he was playing cards, didn't have the mana available to tap something down with Sigardian Priest. If Seth also feels like that may be the case over the course of the next few turns, then that Sigardian Priest is less valuable than the Ingenious Scab, and well, would be a good reason for lining up his blocks that way.
Yeah, long-term planning very important in terms of figuring out the details even on a specific turn's blocking. And here we see Seth Manfield. He's got another play for the turn. It's going to mean that he's going to get to be able to stuck in for 3 in the air, kind of keeping this race alive. And no follow-up beyond an additional land from Seth Manfield. Kind of running out of cards in hand a little bit. I mean, his deck does want to be being on the aggressive, and unfortunately in this matchup, he finds another deck trying to do exactly the same, and drawing too many lands almost as bad as not drawing enough. I mean, that's what we saw from Zen Takahashi in game one, was too few lands. But if Seth Manfield is currently holding on to just additional mana sources rather than threats, then he may find himself outpaced.
So, looking at the attackers on Zen's side of the battlefield, well, that Gref Rats is just going to walk into an Ingenious Scarp, so that's not a good attacker. Wicker Witch, if it attacks, will probably be blocked by Wharf Infiltrator. Not a great exchange, but at least it may grow the Liliana's Elite. Getsav Arsonist can definitely get in there. It may be double blocked, but then you still trade 2 for 1. And Ember Eye Wolf, well, on the one hand you want to be attacking with it, on the other hand may still need it back as a blocker for the Wharf Infiltrator. So looking at all of those options, an attack with Getsav Arsonist seems to be fine. Attacks with other creatures come with some issues attached. Obviously it will depend on what Zen has in hand as potential tricks, and also what kind of tricks from Seth Manfield he is worried about, because given that Seth blocked with his Sigardan Priest, as I mentioned, it might indicate that Seth is expecting to be using his mana, perhaps on some kind of trick here. For instance, well, Borrowed Grace.
Borrowed Grace would certainly be interesting here. He hasn't got enough mana to be able to... Oh, sorry, it's 2 and 2, isn't it? So he can...
No, it's 5 mana for the full Escalate, but hey, still playing it to boost toughness on some creatures, giving prowess, that would be a potential option.
So Manfield not got loads of cards in hand. There we can see the Borrowed Grace. So it's 3 mana to cast and then 1 white and a colorless to escalate. So it will either be +2 power or +2 toughness if he chooses to use it here, if he indeed has it here. And yes, tapping 3 lands. Okay, Strength of the Night. That's another powerful option that is going to make this block look pretty decent.
For sure. So that will allow the Ingenious Scarp to trade with the Getsav Arsonist. Meanwhile, Seth chose to line up Exultant Cultist rather than Wharf Infiltrator to trade with the Wicker Witch. That's actually fine, because he gets to draw a card in the process. But yeah, that Survive the Night was an excellent card here for Seth. Also revealing why he may have felt that he needed to trade off that Sigardan Priest and keep his Ingenious Scarp around.
Indestructibility absolutely vital there in that particular fight, as was the additional power. It meant that on top of that, with a pump, the Ingenious Scarp was able to do everything needed to do. And now Seth Manfield, he's the one with the scariest creatures on the board. Yes, those Ember Eye Wolves can gain a little bit of additional power whenever Zen Takahashi so chooses, but in the meantime, Seth Manfield can quite happily just carry on attacking in the air. And there's even a clue token for Seth Manfield to make the most of the fact that he has all of these lands in play.
Yeah, so far Seth has managed his resources quite well and has come out on on the profitable end of most of the exchanges. He's ahead on board thanks to that flyer that can keep attacking, and for most of the creatures of Zen, he will be able to line up reasonable blocks. That Liliana's Elite, well, perhaps in a couple turns down the road, it may turn into quite a serviceable threat. Currently, it's a 4/4, may grow bigger once some more creatures die on Zen's side of the battlefield, but that is for later.
So Manfield lining up something here. There's a Choking Restraints, that second pick of the entire draft for Seth Manfield. He was initially in green after the first pick. That did not last all too long, fairly swiftly moving into blue-white. And ultimately that working out very well for him so far in this game. He's got Choking Restraints on the Liliana's Elite so that he doesn't even need to worry about however large it may be. At some point he could sacrifice the Restraints in order to exile Liliana's Elite, just to be safe that there isn't some way that Zen Takahashi can either remove that enchantment or perhaps sacrifice his creature for value.
One thing to point out is that Guardian of Pilgrims, the 2/2 on Seth's side of the battlefield, is a spirit. That means that Spectral Shepherd can return it to Seth's hand for just 2 mana. So if Zen would play some kind of removal spell, perhaps on the Guardian of Pilgrims. Zed has that option available to him.
Yeah, having the useful coming into play ability does mean that rebuying on that spirit potentially a little bit more powerful.
And even if we go to the very, very late game, if Zed has just an abundance of mana on the battlefield, he might just start getting tricky by, well, bounce my Guardian, replay it, pump my Flyer, bounce it again, replay it, pump my Flyer. It's something that I don't think we'll see anytime soon, but hey, it is another nice option that the blue-white deck can provide.
Whatever gets the job done, using every pile of the buffalo, but as things stand, Seth Manfield just playing out another spirit, and this one, another flyer able to get stuck in there with the Tattered Haunter.
Yeah, now that's suddenly a 3-turn clock, meaning that Zen better come up with something soon. Still not really able to line up good attacks. He would just trade for some of Set's creatures, won't come ahead in the exchange. Now Set, he's ahead, but Zen still has plenty of good cards remaining in his deck. 2 copies of Smoldering Werewolf, that would be a sweet draw, as it could ping down some of the 1 toughness creatures on Set's side of the board. Also a Spreading Flames, 7 mana, divide 6 damage. Those would be 2 good cards in Zen's deck that may help him get out of this current situation.
I mean, Smoldering Werewolf, he's nearly at the mana where he might be able to live the dream and cast 2 of them in the same turn and just completely decimate Seth Manfield's board. As things stand, though, he does need something, otherwise Seth Manfield could take this relatively quickly here. We've already seen 1 Borrowed Grace, and there is a second copy in Seth Manfield's deck, and if it came along, well, that could prove to be a big problem. Oh, sorry, I misremembered the draft. Just the 1 copy in there, but a couple of Faithbearer Paladins also could be a problem for Zen Takahashi, just in terms of life totals.
Well, the card that Zen had was an Inner Struggle. Looks like he pointed it at the 2/2, which indeed was bounced in response. That doesn't seem to be the best exchange for Zen. Of course, many of Set's big threats are spirits, so Inner Struggle not really able to do much. If you target the Ingenious Scarp, well, it's not gonna deal enough damage to itself, so not really the card you want to be seeing here. And Set has been keeping up plenty of mana to be able to activate his Spectral Shepherd. Now Zen is able to attack for, well, some points with that Ember Eye Wolf, but that's not gonna do it yet. Another Survive the Night. Well, that Scarp will indeed survive. Is it night? Is it day? I don't know, but it will linger around for another turn.
Yeah, whether it's day or night or not probably depends on where in the world you're watching this from. Right here it is a little before 8 in the evening, which means that depending on where in the world you are, it could be light for you, it could be dark. It's pretty dark around here in the winter in Australia, but I'm sure that Seth Manfield is feeling pretty bright about his chances. Casting Guardian of the Pilgrims and getting stuck in here, he's got a whole bunch of damage coming through in the air and a fairly scary Ingenious Scarab on the ground.
Yeah, this is a horrible position for Zen. He may have to find Spreading Flames on the next turn, and even then Seth has plenty of mana up to return his flyers back to his hand. The Tethered Haunter also a spirit, so it can be bounced by Spectral Shepherd. Well, right now Zen may just have to perhaps double block the Ingenious Scarp. That's also not even going to be good. Perhaps jump with the Graph Rats, but still 5 points of flying coming in. And Seth has a potentially lethal attack on the next turn.
And of course, if that wolf does get killed off, and Jace's ingenuity meaning that it's not going to be able to secure a trade with the Scab.
This is just a surgical dismantling. Every turn Seth Manfield came ahead in exchanges, in combat, and that'll do it.
Yeah, there's the handshake. The number 1 seed although number one ranked player in the top 25, only the 7th seed in this top 8, does win his quarterfinals 2-0. He'll be going on to the semi-finals. And for Brian Braun-Duin, watching from somewhere, this is its own special slow-motion horror film. In the top 8 player profile, Seth Manfield did say, "What's at stake for you this week here and at the Pro Tour?" And he says, "Well, if I win, I bad beat Brian Braun-Duin for the GP Player of the Year." I think that he knows that he doesn't want his friend to be in a position where suddenly he's not qualified for the World Championships, but I don't think that's going to stop him from doing everything he can to win.
No.
And we get a chance to see some of our 4th quarterfinal here. Bensek is 1-1 against Jan Sander, and with his red-blue deck, he starts off with a great play in Thermo Alchemist, the little human shaman that just keeps on giving with every spell that you cast. Being tapped here to deal 1 damage to Jan Sander, Sander going to 19, and following that we're going to see a spell from Bensek just to untap it again.
Let's take inventory. Now Bensek is definitely the more experienced player in this matchup. He has Grand Prix top 8s dating back to 2001 and 2002 over in Cape Town as well as Melbourne. He's been trying to get GP trophies in every single continent, but he already has one over here in his home country of Australia. Now Jan Xander, as he's from the Czech Republic, and as his compatriot Petr Sacharek told me earlier today, Jan has only been playing for 1 or 2 years competitive Magic, but he is really, really good. Jan is going to be playing his first Pro Tour next week, but all the Czech players have been super impressed by his skills at the game, and he's shown them right by making the top 8 here at this GP.
And Bensek, happy of course to make top 8 at this GP because it allows him to start chaining together a few Pro Tours. He's going to be playing in Sydney, but he's now also going to be able to make it across to Honolulu. And that really what you want in terms of stringing together finishes, putting something together. I mean, at this point in his career, Bensek's not necessarily chasing Pro Tours in the same way as some of the younger players, but with Mercurial Geist and Thermo Alchemist, he may well be doing well in terms of chasing a GP win, because this looks to be pretty much the ideal in terms of...
Well, Mercurial Geist costs 4 mana, whereas Ben seemingly only had 3 lands on the battlefield, so that was an illegal play. Perhaps, as as many of the players here, they are kind of new to the format. Eldritch Moon has only been released quite recently, so if this is the first time that Bensek is playing with Mercurial Geist, it's likely to just be an honest mistake. Bensek actually told me a funny story from day one, where he learned the hard way what Mirroring Dragon did. Mirroring Dragon, the 4/5 that whenever a player casts a spell that targets it, well, it's being copied for every creature of that player. But Bensek thought that it would just copy the spell for all creatures on the battlefield. What ended up happening was Bensek played Throttle on Mirroring Dragon. The dragon didn't die. Bensek lost 3 of his creatures, none other on the opponent's side, and then, well, Ben just scooped. I mean, it pays off to read the cards to make sure here, and it just goes to show that even the best players can make mistakes. Didn't really harm Ben in his way in making it to the top 8 though.
So Stitchwing Scab coming down for Jan Sander, an end of turn ping there from Bensek's Thermo Alchemist, and I think that you don't necessarily need to see the player's hands to make a prediction as to a card that's going to come down fairly soon for Bensek. If he's got the 4th land, then Mercurial Geist would be the play. We will see whether or not he's able to do that. Fogwalker was the replacement play for him last turn, able to keep down that ghoul up on their screen there.
Yeah, but so far Jan is ahead. He has the bigger creatures on the battlefield. He has been hitting his land drops. So far so good for the young player from the Czech Republic, as Bensek is trying to find his footing, missing a land drop, having to spend mana on a take inventory that didn't affect the board immediately. His creatures don't have a lot of power, so Bensek is defending, but even against that Tooth Collector over there, Ben will not be able to line up any good blocks. So the way it stands, Bensek is in danger of, falling down to 10 life, because the Tooth Collector and the 3 power Flying Scarp can definitely attack Wailing Ghoul will just be, well, bouncing off of any 3 toughness creature really, but those other 2 attackers on Jan's side of the battlefield can easily get in there.
I mean, I guess that the saving grace for Ben Sek here in this tie game of the quarterfinals is with 2 copies of Thermo Alchemist in hand, all of his spells are looking pretty impressive now. They each come with 2 points of damage to Jan Cassander's face on top, but he's going to have to find those spells comparatively quickly and ideally have some of them be removal spells because, yeah, the creatures in play here do rather outshine his in terms of power and toughness.
That is exactly what is going on so far. Now, looking at Jan's hand, there are plenty of non-land cards over there, so he will be adding to the board. Gavony Unhallowed, not the ideal 4-drop for this situation, far from it. When your opponent has 3 creatures with 3 toughness on the battlefield, you don't really want to be playing a 2-power guy. Sure, it may grow bigger whenever any of your creatures die, so that is relevant in case Ben Sek has some kind of removal spell in the form of a burn card such as Fiery Temper, but Gavony Unhallowed not really able to attack much yet. That said, even if it currently is just a 2-4, you might as well send it in, because indeed if Ben Sek has that Fiery Temper, well, all of a sudden it will grow to a 3 power and it will be able to, well, become a profitable attacker.
So Ben just throwing Fogwalker into the graveyard here, having to just stave off life point loss where he can, and Jan Cassander has a follow-up here. It's not the most exciting, but Thraben Gargoyle looks like it's coming down for him. At least at some point fairly soon it may well be able to transform.
Any creature that you can add to the battlefield is valuable whenever your opponent is missing land drops. Yeah, looks like Ben has a bunch of expensive cards in hand. A Wretched Griff, we saw the Mercurial Geist earlier. None of them are gonna come out anytime soon unless Ben finds some lands. Dark Salvation, not bad. So that's being cast for X is 2, which would mean that Jan gets 2 zombies and then gives -X to a creature, where X is the number of zombies on the battlefield. Note that the Wailing Ghoul is a zombie, so that adds up to be able to kill that Thermo Alchemist.
Yeah, lots of work for Ben Sek to do here if he's going to get back in this game. Quite frankly, I don't see it happening. Neither does Ben. He extends his hand. Jan Cassander, well, he's going to be another one of our semi-finalists, and I believe that, I mean, we can see it there in our feature match area. That was the last of our quarterfinals. So we'll be moving on to the semi-finals very shortly indeed. We'll have Brian David Marshall and Marshall Sutcliffe bringing you the details there. But I'm going to head down to the feature match area and see if I can have a speak to some of these players that have just made it through to the elimination stages. So I will leave things with you, Frank, and indeed shortly with Brian David Marshall and Marshall Sutcliffe.